Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Dead Space 3 Awakened DLC, pure survival mode video walkthrough. And that is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm just going to say Awakened DLC, pure survival mode, because it makes more sense. This is Chapter 1, this is Requiem. So when I think of an exceptionally strong way to start a DLC, to bring the fans back and get them all excited about Dead Space again, I don't think there's a single thing that would compare than abseiling. Because I think if everybody put down, on a piece of paper what their favourite section from this game was, it would be unanimous that everybody enjoyed the ice climbing, the abseiling, and all those various different things. So we get to do it again up an ice wall we've already climbed. So thanks for that, Visceral. I enjoyed that immensely. But once you're up here, you are going to notice a lot of recycled environments. They are changed, aesthetically they do look different, and I would say that this DLC is probably more tense than any part of the main game. That's just me, that's completely subjective, and, depending on how much you're a Dead Space freak or you like the horror games will depend on how you're affected by this one. There are a lot of cheap moments like that what you've just seen. I don't really think it's scary when the game just decides to hit you with massive audio for no reason. It's pretty cheap, and it does it quite a lot. It also introduces a flashing and a loud noise effect on the camera, where it all goes, hyper stylized, and it makes it harder to see because the lens zooms in on Isaac, and it can make some fights kind of tricky, which I don't think is great on the player. It might, add the effect they were looking for and give it this horror appraisal, but in the grand scheme of things, it makes the fight a bit of a ball ache unnecessarily. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. Also, flashing to make enemies appear and disappear is a little bit cheap at times. So everyone's going to have mixed opinions on whether or not they think it's effective or scary or challenging, but I just felt it was kind of cheap. However, this is pure survival. That means you do not pick up ammo, you do not pick up med packs, you have to create them yourself. And the first thing I'm going to do here, guys, is I've played the game quite a lot. This is my save, so I do have a lot of tips and things. I'm going to make a force gun with an underslung seeker rifle. It is one of the most powerful combinations on the game for me personally. It's my favourite weapon setup. I'm going to give it stasis support so that every shot... not stasis support, sorry, there's a name for it. Stasis coating, sorry. And every time I fire it, it's going to imbue a little bit of stasis in the enemies, and it just makes crowd control much more manageable. Now that I've done that, I'm going to give it some upgrade circuits. My upgrade path is simple. I try to make the force gun fire as quick as I can, so I'm going to give it rate of fire and probably damage. And the lower tool, the seeker rifle, I'm going to get it max damage, and I'm going to try and make the clip as big as I possibly can. On my first playthrough of this DLC content, I did it on impossible with my, inherited save. I had a character that had a max suit, I had weapons with the best circuits on them essentially, and the entire thing was pretty damn simple. So the reason I chose to do pure survival is not only is there an achievement for it, but it starts you off with a base level character. So you can upgrade your suit, you can upgrade your weapons. You literally start with a vanilla plasma cutter and an SMG. And you've got to go from there. And unless you're going to be following my path, the only real advice you're going to get from this guide is going to be my approach to some of the encounters, which will translate to your weapon setup. But for the most, it's not very difficult. There's a couple of tricky sections, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think anyone's going to have too much of an issue. Make sure you do this after you've made your weapon. I cannot stress how much you need to buy as much ammo as possible, because I actually went into the next room and died because I only had one clip, like an idiot, and there's a lot of necromorphs on the other side of this door. So, learn from my mistakes. You have to approach this guy to trigger it. It's kind of cheap because it starts him really close to you, but he doesn't attack, which is quite nice. So, this is just business as usual. Dismember, kills them quicker, you get a nice critical. The seeker rifle is a guaranteed dismemberment. You can use your kinesis to fire limbs if you want to save a little bit of ammo. It's all entirely preference. But this first encounter is going to throw some black pukers at you, which are the only real thing to note here. If you can kill the fat guys without them letting out the little shits, that's a bonus. You'll also notice my secret rifle is powerful, but it's not got the same kick that it had in my guide, and I believe that's just because I don't have the circuits maxed out on it. It still seems to be a one-shot dismemberment, but every so often enemies will tank it, so just get willing to, you know, have to put a couple more shots in. But once that's done, stamp on all the bodies, you know, get as much resource as you can, because you're going to be needing it just to buy more ammo and to buy med packs if you're going to be using it. I'm not going to be upgrading my suit at all, so if I get into a situation where I have low life, I just have to, you know, get on with it. And that actually does happen in this guide, which I find quite funny. Coming up, there's going to be a room where there's a bunch of guys, and a whole bunch of enemies, and I end up taking some sloppy damage before they turn up from 2 giant things, and it puts me into a situation where I only have a sliver of life, but luckily enough, the enemies that turn up are not very strong, and the force gun just does work. And if you're not a fan of the force gun, you're more of a shotgun guy, I would definitely give the force gun a try. I think it's the most overpowered weapon on this game for crowd control. It's just silly in its effectiveness. And this DLC is not that long either, so, you know, bringing in your best weapons is going to get you through it extremely quickly. And I know for the achievement whores and the trophy hunters, that's probably a good thing. To the people wanting, you know, rich fiction and a deeper analysis of the Dead Space universe, you're going to get a couple of shocks. I'm not going to call them, you know, literary magic. I'm not going to call them life-changing, but they're definitely something, to say the least. Well, this is going to be familiar to anybody who's played as Carver during the co-op missions. However, your wife has been replaced by this dirty bagman, and you're going to get attacked by the phantom children, the little Freddy Krueger kids things. And you do not have to waste any ammo in this sequence. You can just kite this room in a big old loop, and that's all that needs to be done. You can save your ammo, save your life, just get them behind you, keep on running. You're in absolutely no danger if you do this properly. And all we're doing right now is exploiting the pathing system of AIs. Being a human, we can navigate an environment, you know, we can react to situations much quicker than a computer can. And they have trouble on their paths, getting around corners, getting around geometry, and it takes them a little bit longer than it does you, so you're completely safe. And if you're not a fan of those moments, they're going to happen a few times throughout this DLC. I personally think it's kind of cheap again. I expected this to be all new, all fresh, you know, all new geometry, all new environments, new enemies. I expected it to kind of be an apology for the end of this game, because I think the last third of Dead Space 3 is the weakest part of that game. And this is where I take damage, folks, so learn from my mistakes here. This is 2 of the Rosetta monsters. I took the first one's arm, and then I take this guy's arm as well. But they're not dead, and I don't know what happens. I think he goes to the animation to spit, and I kill him, and I still take damage. Like, watch, nothing's happening, and I just took massive damage. The only thing I can think is, maybe he spat one of those exploding babies behind me, and I didn't see it, and it blew up, and it did a lot of damage. And this is that moment where you realise I did not buy any med packs, so I have to do this section and get to a bench and recover. So there are a few ways to avoid this situation. Buy them when you were there, like I should have, or just play better, because I should not have got hit by those Rosettas. I've killed numerous of them. I just got sloppy. So sloppy play can cost lives, and this sequence here is going to introduce a new enemy, and the good thing about that is it's a weak enemy, and I managed to do this without taking any additional damage. If you go over here, you're going to be reintroduced to our old friends. These are the Cathedral kids that you met in Dead Space 2. In this game, I don't remember them being this fragile. What I will say is my force gun on my other character, my stacked character, he could kill those in one shot from the force gun. So that just goes to show that the upgrades definitely make a difference. And make sure you stamp on their bodies, even though they're doing this kind of crazy synchronized pirouetting, you know, even though they're supposed to be dead. Which, does anything stay dead in Dead Space? Isn't that the point? But you might also hear the sound for the robot to put him down and do some looting. But at the beginning of this, if you start from a new fresh save like I did on New Game Plus to play in pure survival mode, you do not have robots, so you can't do the looting. Not to worry though, there's not a lot in this that's all that challenging. But this is about as close as it comes to getting pretty rough. As you push through here, you're going to trip a spawn point just there. Now, a bunch of those kids, I think they're called the pack or something like that, but there's going to be a lot of them. There's going to be an entire orphanage filled with these dirty bastards, and the only thing you want to do is run back to the tunnel that you came from, get them in a nice bottleneck, and just hit them with the force gun. It couldn't be more simple. It really couldn't. And if there was vents, or ice vents, or however other spawning mechanics they use in the snow, this could have been really tricky. But luckily enough, this is just a train of death. They will run directly to you, they will bunch up with their friends, and you can use this opportunity to smash a whole group of them at the same time. But my feelings on the DLC, for anybody wondering, it's a solid piece of content that reuses old geometry, which I'm not a big fan of. I'm really not. I think if you're going to take the time to make us pay for something, at least take the time to model something different. And I know a lot of time probably went into changing the environments, but it's not enough, guys. It really isn't. It needed to be more. If you have a story investment, I think the DLC is mandatory. Not because you're going to get a massive epiphany, or you're not going to be able to completely understand where this is going, but at the same time it's a piece of closure on a game that lacked it. And I definitely felt a lot better at the end of this DLC than I did the game, but not by a large margin. And I'm trying not to be too negative with it, because this is a series that I legitimately love, and Visceral have come out in the press saying that they were under a lot of pressure from EA to make these microtransactions, to make the game more focused as a shooter, to make it more linear, to make it easier, you know, to take the horror away, because a horror game is limited in its audience. An action game can be sold to a much larger demographic, and we don't understand the pressure of a publisher because we're just the consumer. And the one thing that definitely tempers art is funding, and if you don't have the funding, you can't create it. So it's easy to blame Visceral, saying, you know, they didn't make a good job, they betrayed the fans, you know, they pissed on the trust that we'd built in the first two games, but you just don't know the circumstances. So I think in the light of all that news, they've made a decent piece of content. It's really short. It's incredibly short, and it's not cheap. If this was, you know, 300 Microsoft points, 400 Microsoft points, it'd be a steal, but it's not, I don't think. I think it's like 800, and I just don't think that's good enough. But this is me upgrading some of the stasis on my rig. I'm also going to upgrade the kinesis. I'm not going to be upgrading my life, my armor, or my air. That's just so that if I get into a bad spot and I end up taking more hits than you can take, the guide doesn't help anybody. This way, when I have minimalist life, it can help everybody, hopefully. But we're just going to be pushing forward, and anybody who's kind of sick of Tau Volantis and is not the biggest fan of the snow or the Thing-inspired sections, there's not too much left. There's a sequence coming up in the next room, but after that we will be going back into space, where the series originated, and I will see you on those videos. So thank you for watching, and you take care now.